Yeah.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Libby Book Club. I'm your host, David Allen Patali. It's great to have your company on this Wednesday evening as the weather's starting to change. And of course, I'd just like to acknowledge that I'm broadcasting to you tonight from Whadjuk Noongar Boodjar. Pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. It's great to have your company, as well as author tonight, Jay Martin, who's going to be talking to us about her brilliant book, Boomtown Snap. Jay, welcome to the Libby Book Club. How are you going?
Good. Thanks, David. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you. And as always, if you want to participate in the chat, write whatever question you like to Jay, and I'll do my very best to weave it into our discussion. It's no holds barred. You can ask Jay whatever you like within reason. But we'll do our best. And of course, there's going to be a signed copy of Boomtown Snap to give away to the question that we think is the best. And the way we'll judge that maybe is that. It's the question that sparks the most interesting or deepest or, I don't know, most enjoyable passage of conversation. But there are many, many things that we've got to discuss tonight about Boomtown Snap. Only got an hour, but surprisingly, it goes very quickly. So, Jay, would you like to just tell us what is Boomtown Snap about and why did you have to write this story?
Thanks so much, David. Great questions. So, Boomtown Snap is pacey, slightly spicy, book about a woman who is in a man's world, and she is constantly promised that if she does the work, she will get the rewards. And what she finds is she does all the work, and those rewards just don't seem to be kind of coming her way. She's been slogging her way loyally through the ranks of an international mining company that operates between Australia and Canada. And when we meet Georgie, she's definitely had some success. She's kind of a senior woman in this firm. She's got a lot of personal stuff going on, though. She has a boss who is a toxic misogynist. She has a brother-in-law who's a bit of a douchebag, let's be frank, and her sister, and the only person who really got her husband, Josh, is no longer on the scene. And so she's got a few things happening, and the end of that relationship has left her financially and emotionally destroyed. So when her boss approaches her and says, "Oh, have I got a deal for you?" She's working up in the Pilbara in Karratha, and he says, "I've got this great job in Canada. It's in the oil fields. You're perfect for it. It's going to be quick. It's going to be lucrative. This is your opportunity, and you're finally going to get all of the rewards that you've been promised all these years." And it's really not a great time for her. She's got a lot kind of going on personally, but she's like, what? Damn it, I've worked for this, and I deserve this, and I'm going to give it a bash. And the story really opens with Georgie in a hotel room in Edmonton when she's arrived in Canada.
I
Um,
clutched my pearls. It was a very strong beginning. Starts with the sex scene. Excellent.
Spice alert! Spice
Yeah,
alert! Penis,
isolate.
penis on the front page. um, but I think that scene, although there is a lot going on, she basically is says, "I'm 38, I don't have anywhere to live, and I've got my boss's penis in my face." So we're thrown into her world pretty quickly, I think. But she's basically sort of trying to get out of having sex without upsetting him. And I think this really sort of sets up the whole sort of dynamic between her and her boss and her work and everything that we see her sort of go through for the next little while while we follow her journey, which is that she's a smart, capable woman, but she has a very messy reality. And as a woman in that world, she has had some success, and she's definitely got a lot of rewards, but she has to tread carefully, and the world treats her differently because she is a woman in that world.
And Joe, something I loved about Boomtown Snap is every single line has subtext. It's it's the wrong metaphor, but in a comedy of manners where you are always aware of the awkwardness and it's excruciating. With Boomtown Snap, you're always aware of the misogyny. You're always aware of the underlying tectonic shifts that she's trying to navigate. Did you start with that subtext and then have the story, or did you write the story and then go, "Oh wait, I can weave that subtext there," or was it just both?
So many things I could say there. So I'll start with saying, because you'd asked me why I wrote it,
Mhm.
and this was the world that I'm describing in terms of a woman in an international consulting firm who's flown around government boardrooms and has to go and do things and sit with other people and try to get people to make decisions and all of those kinds of things. That was very much my world. And it's a world that I was reflecting on for quite some time and kind of wondering, about this whole kind of, Georgie's sort of essentially enduring misbelief about the world is that if she works hard enough, she will get these rewards. And so then when she doesn't get the rewards, what she has to do is, keep kind of working hard. And Georgie's kind of looking at that and going, I don't really think this is actually kind of the case. And that's, that's not only my journey, but that was sort of something where I'm like, I don't think it's that simple. The people who work hard are not the people that get to the top. That's interesting, isn't it? And so there were quite a few scenes through the book where she's sitting in boardrooms and she can just see that things are not really right, but she can't quite figure it out. And I think those things were very much kind of my real experiences, often sitting in those rooms going, I'm not asking the right people the right questions, but I've been sent here and I have to kind of do it. But I think at the end of the day, Boomtown Snap would not have been written if I wasn't sent by my company to Canada, to Alberta, to Edmonton, and no affair with the boss, luckily, so that didn't happen. But, I was sent to Alberta, and there's a scene in the book where Georgie is in this fast food restaurant, A&W, which is the fast food over there, and she's looking around and there's all these men in gritty high-vis kind of suits, and they're all talking about their swings and how long it's going to be before they get to their families over east, and how hard they're working for how much money they're making, and there's a lot of money slushing about, and there's this brutal kind of climate outside. And she says to her offsider, because they're trying to get some food, and it's taking a long time, and because there's nobody working behind the counter. And she says to her offsider, how come they don't put some more people on, this counter? Like, why do we have to wait so long? And her offsider, who's Canadian, says, it's Fort McMurray. Like, nobody can get staff to do anything here because everyone's off making too much money on the oil rigs. And that sort of, Georgie's like, I came all the way around the world from Karratha to Fort McMurray, and it's kind of the same here. And that's a scene from the book, but it's very much my own experience of arriving in Edmonton and just seeing like these cashed up people with jobs on the mines, and this society and this culture that was so much part of, the boom and bust kind of mentality, and this Wild West kind of ethos about itself. And I just went, I thought I'd come somewhere else for an adventure, but here I am. I'm halfway around the world, and it's the same. And the fact that it's -40 outside instead of +50 is just another version of something very similar. And so that's kind of where a lot of it kind of started. And in terms of the misogyny, I mean, it's interesting because, I was a senior woman in firms, and someone said to me, is this the kind of sexism that have you experienced sexism in the workplace? And I thought, I definitely have. And, when I was at uni and before I was at uni, I did hospitality and those kinds of jobs. And the sexism is so blatant and overt that you just have to kind of like laugh and kind of roll with it. Except, of course, that sometimes it can actually be kind of physically threatening. So sometimes it's funny, sometimes it's really not. But what I observed when you kind of get into like the consulting world and the government world is that the sexism and the misogyny doesn't go away. It just changes. And it's interesting that you said about the subtext. It becomes very subtle to the point where you're almost like questioning yourself and going, did I imagine that? Or did that person really just mean what I think they meant? And that's very much also Georgie's journey, where she's shaking hands with her boss, Randy, bless him, who I'm sure we'll talk about in a moment, when she meets him. And he just kind of, when he shakes her hand, he just kind of rubs her hand a little bit with his thumb to the point where she goes, maybe that's just how they shake hands in Canada. And this is very much, I think, how the sexism becomes experienced when you kind of, go further up in the world. It's just a little bit where you go, is that me, or is this really what I think it is,
I want to read a quote that you start the book with from Dorothy Hewitt, the great West Australian writer, from The Garden in the City. Every now and again, this society of lotus eaters found the crock of precious metals at the rainbow's end in its desert places, and this was both its wealth and its downfall. To you, what does that quote mean in the context of Western Australia, but also Edmonton, which is kind of like the dark mirror.
Yeah. So this quote is thanks to David Wish-Wilson, who wrote the book, of course, called Perth. And in that book, he quotes that line. And I thought, that's interesting. And so then, because I'm like, what's a lotus eater? And it's got all these metaphors in it that I had to go and that really went to like try to understand. Because it was when I was writing the book and I was trying to understand what makes Western Australia what it is, because obviously we have, lots of nice stuff here and, sunshine and barbecues and renovations and all those things, but there's something else. And Dorothy Hewitt, the rest of the quote talks about the worm in the bud, the element of dark toxicity or something, something bad that's in this kind of apparently perfect kind of flower. And I thought, gosh, that's an interesting kind of metaphor. And then she talks about the Society of Lotus Eaters. Now I had to go and look up what a lotus eater was because I did not know that. And it's basically the idea of someone that comes into easy money, that they're sort of very lazy and they just sit around and kind of eat lotus flowers all day. And I think, there's an element of not everything for everyone in Western Australia is good. We know that. There are lots of people who are struggling and who don't have what they need. But there's a lot of people who have very nice lives here. And I think what's interesting is, that's very much bound up in the idea of who we are and who we are being, a society of people who dig stuff out of the ground and ship it off to other places and are rewarded for that by good prices when times are good and not when times are bad, and then the government goes, oh, we busted, we never saw this coming, please give us more money. And I suppose there is a laziness, I think, in that quote, that the idea that life here is a bit too easy, and it breeds a laziness. And myself, my sort of job is in actually social services and human services. It's not predominantly in the mining and resources industry. And I see, people just kind of going, oh, look, life is pretty good. Let's not worry too much about the things that aren't really that, that worrying. The people who don't have enough, like they can get a job on the mines if things are tough. And I think my criticism, if I wanted to make one of Western Australia, is that intellectual laziness carries forward, I think, to some really tough problems that, I like to think that we could really have a go at doing a great job of solving if we really wanted to, and yet something kind of keeps us from that. And I feel very strongly about that. And I think Georgie feels very strongly about that as well.
Well, with that in mind, I wanted to ask, Georgie outwardly has every sign of West Australian success. She's got the high-paying job, fantastic wardrobe. She basically does whatever she likes. She's got a house, albeit in the classic West Australian sense. It's now, how would we explain this later? She's bought it at
the top of the market's
yeah. So she's absolutely skint, but outwardly she's an incredibly successful West Australian. But inside, there's that subtext that is she waking up from being a lotus eater, or was she, I don't know, never one to begin with?
It's interesting. I think it goes to the heart of what we define as success. And I think for myself, if I reflect on my own kind of working life, I've frankly been too busy for most of it to reflect much on what success is, other than getting the stuff. Like, she has the big mortgage on the house. She's surrounded by a lot of people who are doing a lot of renovations. She's, her nephew's off to private school, and, everyone's very excited about, having to pay $30,000, for that, because that's somehow good. And I think what she sees is that people aren't thinking very much about what this is all for and what it all means. And she doesn't, I think, for a while, because she's kind of drunk the Kool-Aid. I mean, I think there's very much like she's drunk the Kool-Aid, and she just thinks, well, this must be success, because look, everyone I keep being told this is success. And I think what we see, of course, in her family relationships, she has a sister who is in an interesting situation. She has a little nephew, of course, who's grows up during the book, but most of the book is around 7. And he's kind of the thing that keeps drawing her back and keeps her going, actually, this isn't all there is. And she just can't quite figure it out, until, of course, she's forced to actually kind of make some choices, which is what makes her an interesting character, because she does have to choose between family and career in a whole bunch of ways, which is a very real choice for some people, and yeah, which makes her interesting, I think.
Absolutely, and she displays great moral courage in her family relationship. She calls out the behavior that her brother-in-law is displaying toward her sister and toward her nephew. She confronts Josh's behavior, Josh's condition and his behavior. She is able to take those stands. What drives that in her? She has a strong sense of social justice, or but then that's subsumed in this very high-powered job she has, where she has to kind of push that to the side.
I think she does take a stand at times and in some ways. And I think this is basically where we see Georgie's conundrum the whole way through, because there are things that people expect of her and there are things that she wants. And those are not the same things. And she's constantly forced to choose between what other people want her to do, which is often her boss, her brother-in-law, even her sister, because her and her sister don't agree on everything. And there's what she wants to do and what she wants to have. And I think, she just kind of wants to get on with it. Like, she wants to have a house and a home and a husband and some kids and, have a nice life. But there are all these people who want other things of her. And I think that that's a very real conundrum, particularly for women, but not only for women. Because, again, we're all trying to make, the best of what we can and just kind of get on with it. But there are all these things that kind of get in the way. And, there are very specific instances in the book where, for example, Tommy, the little nephew, calls her up and, his friend is being bullied and he kind of wants some help. And he's like, I don't know what to do. How do I support this friend of mine? And he calls at the moment that she's got a deadline for her boss. And that, I think, is sort of emblematic of the whole situation that Georgie's in, which is that she knows what she wants to do. She wants to spend time talking to this little person about, like, how the world should be, different and how he should be different in it. But she's got a deadline, and she often chooses the deadline because she's like, well, the boss is right here and I have to get this done and I'll figure it out, the rest of it out, kind of thing. And so I think she does stand up for it, but I think that also, you can't sort of get away from the metaphor of the front page, which is, where Georgie is trying to decide if she, should give in to her boss's demands and have sex with him, even though she really doesn't want to. That really is kind of I think the situation that we've put ourselves in as a community with sometimes the resources industry, like, where what we're being offered is not really a great deal, but we've got two maybe interesting deals. And I think, it's important to say this is not mining or anti-resources industry book, but it is a book that causes us, I think, I would hope, to have some questions about, like, what is the deal that we've struck with whose benefit is it in? Have we all had a say in that? And if we sat down and thought about it, is this the best deal that we think that we could get for everyone, not just the people who are powerful and in charge of everything, but the people who don't, the people like the little kid who's just trying to, like, understand how to make his way in the world, and the people who don't have enough. Like, have we thought about, what we really should be doing for those people in the context of having a lot of resources to work with?
And royalties for regions, that sort of comes in brilliantly, because when Georgie goes to Edmonton, she's tasked by Randy, who I think we should definitely talk about. Win a new contract. But she starts talking about royalties for regions from WA, that there is a chance to do something different. There is an opportunity. There is a way.
Yeah, and so
it goes down like a lead balloon, but
bless the WA state government. I feel like I can say this because I used to be a WA state government employee as well as Commonwealth public servant. So I feel like I've got enough to be I'm on solid ground to say some of these things. Some of the decisions we've made, honestly, they're just baffling, and it was interesting kind of going back. And when I started this book, I thought, I've got a bit of a view that we seem to have wasted a bit of money that we generated through the mining boom. Yep. And this
Yeah.
book particularly kind of takes place between about 2007 and about 2014-ish. Um, and and I was like, but I'm probably going to do the research, and I'm probably going to find out, it's not as bad as I think it was. Well, I read all of the, Officer Order General kind of reports and all of these different kinds of things. It's way worse. We really squandered that boom. And I am absolutely not saying that any other government has done it better. We just continue to roll out these things where we have all of these booms, we have all of these resources that we could create, the best place in the world to live. And in many ways we do have it. We do have one of the best places in the world to live. We shouldn't forget that. But how much better could it be if we, really applied some intellectual kind of curiosity about these kinds of things? And when I looked at royalties for regions, which, wasn't a terrible idea, that the money that was taken out of regions like the Pilbara and like the Southwest, where all the mining happens, should be spent in those regions. It's not a terrible idea. The problem is how it was implemented, which was basically a slush fund where everything, got funded, and there's some extraordinarily expensive bus shelters, on a highway, with buses. Although it's funny because I was camping down at Dwelling Up in a couple of days ago, and I was staying at a place that was like, funded by royalties for regions. I'm like,
oh no way, you're like, it's following it.
What happened is, and this is where it got really interesting. I went to Edmonton. I went to Alberta, which is in the west of Canada, and lived there for 2 years, and it was the same. Down to they started just handing out cash to people. So everyone got a check for $400 because they had so much money they didn't know what to do with it. So they just started giving it away. And I thought, well, at least WA hasn't done that. And then, I don't know, like a month later, we all got $400 like electricity subsidies. And I think, oh, okay, well, yeah, we have to.
This is simple.
Again, there's nothing wrong with that. But I'm like, I don't need that. You can have my $400. Frankly, you can have the next $400 you gave me as well. And I'll hand back my free transport. But because there are all these people that need things that don't have them, and I do not need these things I'm getting. And I'm, the free zoo was lovely, but I didn't need it.
There's other things, yeah. Homeless is pretty good as well. Like, yeah. Can I ask then about consulting? Because that's a, let's say that's a pond that takes a lot of the water, and how does someone like Randy become the big fish in consulting? What's that world, and what's Randy like, and why does he rise to the top?
Consulting is fascinating, and I was in consulting for 7 years, 5 years in Australia and 2 years in Canada for a big firm, and I thought I don't think anyone's ever tried to write a book about consulting, not a fiction book, because and when I did it, I thought, yeah, I see why, because it's very confusing. People are like, what's a consultant? I'm like, yeah, we do stuff and we get paid for it. But, and I didn't work on anything like the job that was in the book, but the job that was in the book was very like something I could have done, which is basically so the thing that Georgie has to get done is that the government of Alberta needs a new advisor to tell them how great their mining and oil and gas kind of economy is, and so it needs some people to sort of advise them on all of these kinds of things. And that's a very real kind of example. I went, I did things like I went to the Pilbara and evaluated, were the oil mining companies up there spending a whole bunch of community infrastructure grants? Were they going to good things or not? I also looked at things like, the efficiency of like National Offshore Petroleum Authority, arrangements, things. You really do get kind of like given, here's a problem, go and kind of fix it, or go and write a report on it. And this is very, very highly valued, and so, but slightly sometimes a bit ridiculous, And so I did kind of want to write a report set in that, or a book set in that kind of world. There's a lot more to say about it, but when there's a scene in the book where Georgie's sitting in a room full of government bureaucrats, and she has negotiated with a local Aboriginal community, and they have come up with a great idea, which will generate jobs and which will keep economic activity in the local area, and which will generate a whole bunch of, really, really useful kind of skills. And everyone wants this, and they've done a cost benefit analysis and found out, everyone would be much better off if they, did things kind of this way, which is a very real example of the kind of thing that I would have done. And the government just says, oh, no, we sort of can't be bothered. And that's also a very real example of something that, did happen when I was working on the other side, when I was working for government. And you said before about royalties for regions. There are other things that are documented in that book. For example, when the previous government in Western Australia was going to close 150 Aboriginal communities, and when they were going to defund a whole different kind of things at various times, and those decisions were made. The only reason they didn't happen was because there was a change of government. And again, I just think those things aren't documented anywhere. And it was something quite important to me to document. This stuff was going to happen. People were going to, imagine if you're sitting at home and the government comes in and says, actually, your shopping centre, it's too hard and we're not going to have it anymore. We wouldn't accept that. And actually we're going to take your water as well. We wouldn't accept that, and we wouldn't expect that. But these were actual real things that were going to happen to people. And the only reason they didn't was because they were voted out of office. And I just think sometimes these things are really important to document and remember what could have happened,
And guys like Randy make the decision over golf handicaps. And
Randy. Yeah, let's get on to Randy.
I asked you before, has Randy ever done an actual day of work in his life?
So in the consulting world, there are people who do the work, people like Georgie, and then there are people who get the rewards, and they are not the same people. And they are people like Randy. So Randy, for people who haven't read the book, Randy is Georgie's boss, who she gets given when she goes to Canada. She arrives in Canada and she has this new big, big boss who she has to impress. And Randy immediately does not let her get a word in, does not have any time for her, is not interested in anything she has to say, and really has no time for her, doesn't give her any of the things that she actually needs to succeed in this job that he's given her. And the entire book is basically her trying to figure out, how can she win, in this situation that she's been put in. And so Randy is a pig. And does he do a day's work? What those guys do is they bring in the work that keeps everyone else afloat, and they do it, as you said, because of personal. Often, sometimes there are some very good operators who are genuine and authentic and actually add value, and then there are some like Randy who went to the right school and are members of the right golf club, and that's how business happens in every town in the world, I'm sure. And those people get rewarded because that's their job. And has he done an actual day's work? Probably not, and you probably wouldn't want him to. But when I was writing the book, you send it out to beta readers, which is basically people who have a read of sort of drafts for you and say, oh, I like this, don't like this, what's going on here. And every beta reader, I ask them, is Randy too much? Have I gone a bit over and made him a bit of a caricature? Because I just chucked in every bad thing that I could think of. And every one of them came back and said, oh, nah, I worked for Randy.
Yeah.
They'd all name him. They'd be like, oh yeah, his name was Lou, or his name was Vic, or his name was, Michael, or whatever. They'd name him and they'd say, I worked for him. He was exactly like that. And they would all say, and he's still the boss. He's still in charge.
Yeah. Yeah. And that great line that Georgie says, they just want you to be like them. That's really the subtext of it all. How do you succeed? You be like them.
You be like them. Yeah. And, this is Georgie's kind of decision. And I think, what's really at the heart of the book is that there is what's right and there's what's rewarded, and they're not the same thing. And she constantly has to choose between, the rewards that she deserves. She's worked for these things, and that's what she thinks, and she's right. But they're not right. And this dissonance or this kind of disjuncture becomes harder and harder for her to make sense of as the book goes on, and she's forced to choose in the end.
The relationship that Georgie's got with her sister and everything that's going on with her sister, and also everything that's going on with her partner, that's like, was that an interesting thing to play with, that you could mirror what was going on in Edmonton with everything that had happened previously and then was happening at the same time? Because you could have just stayed in Canada, but having these other external things, did that give you just more dramatic, I don't know, that gave you more places to stab at, you could go out from?
Yeah, absolutely. So the book is told in two timelines. So alternating chapters, and every second chapter is in Canada, and then every second chapter is in Western Australia. And the Canada chapters really take us about 3 months, basically, the moment she arrives in Canada, and she has to figure out how to get this job done, and whether she can, fix Randy or not, and get this kind of, job that she needs to sort of get her promotion. And then the other timeline is the past timeline, which takes us about 7 years earlier and tells us the story of how she ended up in that hotel room with her boss, and what went on. And a lot of that is about her family and her relationship breakdown, and her stuff with her sister. And the reason for doing that, I think, was because I wanted to tell the story both places. I didn't want this to be a book about Western Australia that had a bit of Canada in it, or a bit of, a book about Canada that had a bit of Western Australia. The point of making this book is that these two places are so much the same. And, to really understand why, you sort of need a whole half a book on each of them, I think. Particularly because most people are only going to be familiar with one of those places. Most people aren't familiar with both. And so I was trying to kind of explain and show like how they were the same. But I think we also had to really understand like how Georgie ended up in this situation. Like, there was a lot of backstory that didn't go into the final book. There's a whole bunch of other backstory about kind of Georgie and Tara and their relationship and things. But I sort of ended up narrowing it down to, and you do, as you know, David, you sort of have to write sometimes a lot of things about what happened in the past, and then they all go, because it's great that you know that, but your readers don't need they don't need to know that when they were 5, this is what the birthday party was like. But you have to know as a writer. And what it sort of got narrowed down to was, that Georgie and Tara, are really these two sisters who look on the surface quite different, because Georgie is a career woman and she's off, traveling the world and being very successful. Tara's a stay-at-home mum. She's looking after her son, but she's doing that because she's got a FIFO husband who's never there. So they're sort of essentially, although their lives look very different on the outside, I think really they're looking for the same thing, which is security, economic independence and financial security that they haven't had for various reasons. And they're sort of pursuing that in different ways, but in ways that are quite so Georgie's attaching herself to a very powerful boss, and Tara's ended up attaching herself to like high-powered kind of husband. And so both of the ways that they're trying to kind of achieve success and security for themselves are basically leaving them very vulnerable. And so on the surface they look quite different, but on closer look they're sort of really the same kind of struggle. And both of them just kind of want to be left alone to have what they want. They want a family and they want a job and they want all their things, but they're sort of having to choose. And because they're in Western Australia, of course, I made it about the mine. There's all the mining kind of context of that. So Georgie is able to kind of climb up a mining corporate ladder, and Tara is supporting the FIFO husband. And both of these are very real and valid and legitimate choices for women and men as well to make. But it is kind of like it's very WA, isn't it?
Indeed.
And Alberta.
That's great, Joe. Well, look, we're about halfway through, and somehow, Boomtown, snap your fingers, and the time goes. But we've got lots of time left if you want to chuck a question in the chat, and we've got a couple here. One touches on a very intense moment in the book around Georgie's pregnancy, So it's Melanie's asking, Pilbara girl, I love reminiscing about the lifestyle. I enjoyed reading the book. Curious as to the way Georgie's character developed through the book. She's very morally upright, but also she lies about the birth control. And that initiates quite an intense scene, a sequence of events. But how does Georgie, go? What's going through her mind as she's going through that particular experience?
Yeah, I mean, thank you so much for that question. I think Georgie has a moral thread, absolutely. But Georgie makes some morally questionable decisions, through the whole book. She treats people, when she gets into a position of power and she has, kind of young co-workers. She doesn't always treat them very well. She sometimes, in fact, treats them very poorly. And yeah, she lies, about something, about taking the pill, but she kind of justifies it to herself by saying, well, if my husband had known, he would have been happy. Even though we've got sort of evidence that, he actually wouldn't have been that happy. But I think it's about that. It's about the way that we justify morally questionable decisions. I mean, that's a pretty morally questionable decision. It's a morally questionable decision that I would hope that people have been given enough information in the book to see why she's made it, because she wants a baby. And so, oh, gee, I forgot to, take my pill. But, it is also about that, the ends justify the means. And I think that is very much one of the themes of the book, that, well, let's not worry too much about, what's destroyed and what's kind of lied about and what's not exactly the truth, as we're going through this thing, because, at the end it all kind of turns out. And so I think it's that kind of, that kind of sense.
Does it tie into what you were saying before about Randy? A beta reader said, you were worried he was maybe too over the top. They're like, no, you can go further. There's a real realness to everything in Boomtown Snap. It's recognizable. It's the drama of everyday life. Like there were scenes where I was like, I've been in that meeting. I've seen that kind of thing going on. Wow. There's so much drama in everyday life that you brought beautifully to the page. Was that a challenge for you to sort of balance? Like you didn't want to be too dramatic, but at the same time, no, hang on, I've really got something quite meaty here.
Oh, thank you for that. I really appreciate that. There is a lot that's drawn from my own kind of experiences. While the book is not autobiographical, I would say,
Oh, yeah.
there's definitely like stuff that's I'm like, oh yeah, that happened to me.
Yeah, right, well,
Well,
yeah.
And in terms of the drama, I mean, it's interesting. I actually had to turn down some of the drama sometimes. Like, 'cause I don't have a sister, and so I had a bunch of people who had sisters read it. And some of the early stuff, I had Georgie and Tara have these terrible fights, and they're just like, we would never speak to our sister again if she said that to us. I'm like, oh, okay, too much. But
Waters fight pretty. They're fine, but yeah, it's pretty intense.
But I think this is where, as a writer, you have to be able to kind of judge these things. And just because you think it'd be fun to write, a lot of the Randy stuff was very fun to write. But you also have to check back and go, have I gone, just because it's fun to write doesn't mean that, you need to read it. And I think, there were times when I definitely pulled it back because I'm like, okay, they're fun to write, but actually nobody wanted to read that. Nobody wants to read two sisters actually like really going for it. But I think, life is full of drama.
Yeah. No, and Randy's got a question here, which is great. I'm curious about whether Nico is after Georgie's best interest at heart, or if he's really a tool of the old boys club. This is our other male
Yeah, so this is
agonist.
yeah.
Yeah.
Great question. And Nico, of course, is another toxic male in Georgie's life. And I think it's a really interesting question. He ostensibly is very supportive of her.
Mm.
And he ostensibly, has supported her career and basically kind of got her where she is in a lot of ways. And I think that that kind of mentorship and guardianship is very real. if I think about myself as a young professional, one of the pieces of advice I was given was don't get a female mentor because they won't be able to help you. Get a male mentor because they will get ahead and they will take you with them, whereas the female mentor won't get as ahead. You know, so these are interesting, right? So, so I think he genuinely has helped her. But I think at the end of the day, if I think about their relationship, how I wanted to craft it, it's really a form of grooming, because when push comes to shove, yeah, he's helped her. There's no doubt about it. And at the end of the day, he wants something in return, which she is inclined to try to figure out how she can give him, which of course is what makes it so interesting. And I suppose this is the other theme that goes through all of the kind of the book, is this theme about coercive control, because Georgie is always being pushed to say, what she wants. She knows what she wants for herself, and she knows that these other people want other things from her, and she's going to be rewarded if she does those things. So why would she do them? It makes no sense. Well, she does them because, there's all this coercion around the decisions. And I think Nico was the one that I think I played with the most of that, because Randy is quite obviously an ass from the moment we meet him, and we know what she wants. She wants the promotion. Like, it's quite clear. Nico is a bit shadier. I think she does like and admire him in many ways, but he's really the one that kind of is the most coercive, because he hides who he really is until the very end, kind of thing. And we sort of find out a bit more about Nico, and we kind of go, oh, all right, interesting. And that of course is how powerful people get their way. And this is I think what I tried to kind of do with the whole book was, that's how the brother-in-law gets his way with Tara, is through this sort of a different process, but a process of coercive control, where he's got her financially dependent, and then she has fewer choices because of that. And extrapolated out again, this is where the communities are sitting going, well, okay, you've given us a few choices and made it seem like that's the choices that we have, because it is, but actually there are other choices that we're not getting. And so it's really that kind of exercise of power, about how it is that some people get more choices than others, which of course is is very interesting, isn't it?
And also that ultimately Georgie's her success is so hollow. I don't want to give away too much, but when she's offered the partnership, you'll be made, you're in, but we just needed one woman to make the quota. What are you upset about? Like, when Randy says, yeah, what are you upset about? You should just be happy with the promotion. It's like, wow, what a great, it's like high to low instantaneously.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing about people like Randy, that they just don't give you an inch, and even when you do all of the things that you have been asked to do and more, and you do them well, and you continue to do them, and you work and you do the work, even if they sort of get forced into giving you the reward, there's always like a little thing. It's like that, that kind of hidden misogyny where, it's like, was that just me taking that a bit sensitively? And they'll say things like that to you. Oh, why are you taking it so personally? You women, like, why are you crying now? Because that's what kind of happens, that they make it about you, because they can't make it about them. I mean, that's it was I had a lot of fun, a lot of things to play with in this book, and I enjoyed playing with them all.
Indeed. And I've got some questions that we can maybe switch to, because this is something that people may not know about you, but you love a good 2-star review.
I do. I have an alter ego.
2-star Tuesday Day on social media. Can you tell us a bit about that, and why are you diving into these often horrible but sometimes hilarious?
Well, I think to understand 2-star Tuesday is my alter ego, and to understand 2-star Tuesday, you really have to go back to Ken. And I read a book called The Secret Life of Bees, which is a lovely book about a black sort of
Yeah.
black young woman's coming of age in the American South. And I thought this is a very nice book. And so whenever I read a book, whenever I think about it, I read the opposite review. So if I like it, I read the low reviews. If I
Ah,
the high reviews, because I want to see what people saw that was different,
cool.
So I really like this book. So I was reading kind of the low reviews to see what people didn't like about it. And that's where we meet Ken. And Ken, bless him, gave the book 2 stars. He said it was ridiculous and hopeless, and it added to his rule of thumb to never read books by women. And I thought, well, that's interesting, Ken. And so I posted this because I thought it was funny. Then I thought, I wonder why else people are giving books 2 stars. And so I just started having a bit of a look at it. And then I just found the most interesting reasons that people were giving books 2 stars. There was a woman who gave a book 2 stars because there was a squashed spider on page 77, 2 stars. There was, what else have I had? People who, lots of the font, they don't like the font. The font was too small. The delivery took too long. That's a very common one. Another one, but then there are some that kind of make you question things. Like there's one that's like, this had blood stains on it, and I thought that sounds like a book with a history to me.
Where have you gotten this book from? And reviews can kill a book, or they can make it fly. So isn't it fascinating to know that what sort of percentage would you say of these 2-star reviews are thoughtful or considered assessments of literary merit?
Well, what I discovered, Goodreads is quite different. Goodreads, people are actually very, very serious on Goodreads.
Yes, yeah.
Very good. Had to get a bad review on Goodreads. Oh, I will say someone gave Trent Dalton Boy Swallows Universe 2 stars because they just broke up with their boyfriend and they weren't in a good mood. And that's the reason that they gave the book 2 stars.
Damn you, Trent. Damn.
But I would say Amazon is really interesting. I reckon of the 2-star reviews, and I read a lot of them, the 2-star reviews I've read, 40 to 50%, I reckon, are about delivery speed, print quality, print times, things like that.
So that really should be a review of Amazon rather than the book. Okay.
And it's also breaks apart because people really read reviews. They absolutely, they read them and they definitely look at the star rating, and they will know, if there's a 4.6 and a 4.8, they'll buy the 4.8. And people are rating on, really dumb stuff like that they broke up with their boyfriend. And, I just thought it's kind of interesting. But I have learned a lot, and I try to be, I try not to read my reviews, and I'm pretty good at not reading them. But if I accidentally catch the number and it's not the number I was hoping, I'm like, it was just print quality.
All right. I got to say, I'm often baffled by 3 stars. I'm like, come on. It's either love or hate. Like 3 is, come on. It's like lukewarm water. Come on.
Yeah. Well, I discovered a whole bunch of people out there who give 3 stars for anything they finish. So if they finish it, it gets 3 stars. It's interesting. Like there's a whole subculture out there that we could have a whole hour talking about.
Oh no. Bring back Margaret and David, where they at least had a bit of funny about it. Well, Jay, you are an incredibly busy person. I actually met you physically in person at I'll call it a writer's drinks piss up that you organized, which was lovely. But you've also won the TRG Hungerford Award for your first book, Vodka and Apple Juice, Travels of an Undiplomatic Wife in Poland. Can you talk a bit about that book and the writing of that, but also how is it different writing a non-fiction book versus a fiction book?
Well, when I was writing Vodka and Apple Juice, so that was a book that came from, I lived in Poland for 3 years as a diplomatic spouse. My husband was in the diplomatic service, and I failed miserably to be a diplomatic spouse for 3 years, and then I wrote a book about it. So it was kind of funny because I would always say, people are like, oh, you're writing a book, and I was a bit embarrassed about it. I'm like, oh, I'm just doing a bit of writing, it's not going to win any awards. And then it was kind of funny, of course, because it won the TRG Hungerford, which is coming up again in February. So people, if they have manuscripts, it's for unpublished manuscripts by unpublished authors. So if you have a manuscript in your bottom drawer, now is the time to get it out and dust it off. Because honestly, no one could be more surprised than me that I won that book, so won that award. So you know, you never know. But I submitted that, and that was published. In fact, it was Fremantle Press's first creative non-fiction, so memoir, that was published as a Hungerford awardee, and there's since been a number of them. So, which I think is great because memoir is my favourite genre, and I think what that changed was sort of everything, to be honest. You know, I never thought of myself as a writer. You know, all these people who are like, oh, I always want to write a book. You know, it never occurred to me that that would be something that I would do. So why I spent, I think 6 years doing it, I don't really know. But other than, it, you know, you start and you get passionate about it and you just want to keep going. And so I did that. I wrote that whole book pretty much on the bus, on the 111 going up Kang Highway to and from my job as a management consultant. And yeah. After that, I think I was so surprised that I kind of went away for 6 years and went, I still think maybe they made a mistake. You know, 6 years later, can they still, you know, take that prize back? But as a result of it, I met some very nice people, including another person who had written a memoir about moving to Australia as a Canadian, Ashley Calagian Blunt, who is on my front cover, wonderful crime writer, and also an incredible writing mentor. She has helped and supported so many writers, and she invited me to join a writing group. And I remember actually thinking, but I've written a book. I must be able to write, but I'll go along and I'll see what the deal is. And then I discovered, oh, I can't write, or I have some skills that I really, really improve on. And what I learned from that was I actually started learning craft, and I started learning craft of structure. And that's when I actually started to understand, okay, this is actually how you structure a book. And I think, you know, it's like, you know, you can get away with writing a book that doesn't maybe conform to all the structural kind of things. But it takes a long, long time, and it's very, very painful. And I think when you start actually understanding it and learning it and studying it and kind of practicing, it just gets a lot easier and a lot quicker. And Boomtown Snap, I think, was from the moment I put the first word on a page to the moment it was on the shelf was 3 years, which is very quick.
That's very cool. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I read it in 2 days. Sorry. 3 years of work.
Could have at least spent a week on it. But thank you.
It's a good book. So, Jay, I've got a question that segues very neatly with a comment here from Tim Landrigan. He says, not really a question, but I really enjoyed the book despite the first chapter.
Aww.
I found myself getting really annoyed with Georgie, thinking, why are you doing that? Which I think is a sign of a well-written character. Jay, you teach writing classes now. You're a member of a writing group. What sort of advice would you give to aspiring writers or people who are in the trenches trying to form it? How do you make a character that pops off the page like Georgie, who frustrates you in a good way?
Yeah, and I mean, Tim has hit the nail on the head. It's giving them a motivation for doing it. So never making it kind of like, I don't know why, you know, I don't know why she's doing this. This makes no sense. You know, the character should always have a really clear goal. And it doesn't matter what that goal is. That goal can be getting a cup of coffee, getting out of the rain, you know, putting the tent up, you know, without it falling down. You know, specific and clear is great, actually. And that, you know, that really bonds us to a character, because immediately, I've just got to get a coffee. And immediately we're like, does she get the coffee? Like, you know, so give them a really specific and tangible goal, and then put things in their way. Did she get the coffee? Oh, no, she's fallen over. Oh, no, her FPOS card doesn't work. Oh, no, like, you know, they're closed today. You know, it's kind of that simple and that complicated, because it's one of those things that sounds very, very easy to say, oh, just give your character a goal and then put things in their way. You know, but the art is in the detail of it. But yeah, that's really the key to it, I think.
Jay, are you working on anything at the moment, can we expect something bubbling away? Is there?
I am actually in Dwelling Up at the moment because I am doing some research for my next book, which is going to be about set in the Southwest, probably somewhere around a fictional version of Dwelling Up. I think Western Australia is fascinating. I don't I get, you know, why you would want to go and spend 120,000 words creating like a sci-fi novel, but I'm like, there is enough tension and drama in a small town in Western Australia to keep us all going for a very long time. And I have an idea for a book, which I'm working on at the moment, which is about the farmers and the loggers and the miners and the tourism people are all, you know, trying to get this town to keep going. And then the cyclists in Lycra arrive. And will that be will that save the town, or will it be the final straw that destroys it? So let's find out. That's right.
Well, Jay, I wanted to ask as well, Boomtown Snap. Where did the title come from? Because it really stays there. It's got that musical quality.
Thank you. Boomtown Snap, for the longest time, it was called Bulldust Clouds. The idea being the bulldust.
Bullshit. Bulldust, yeah.
Yeah, the bulldust being the dust that comes off the truck tires in the Pilbara, or a lot of places around Australia, and then bulldust, like it being bullshit, you know, or lies. And that clouding things, you know, that we're all kind of, you know, distracted by the lies that we've been told about things. And anyway, I took that to some Canadians, and the Canadians were like, we don't understand anything about this. so this title makes no sense to us. So we couldn't have that one because it didn't translate. So Boomtown Snap is essentially, Boomtown's obviously snap in the sense of going, you know, kaput, and also in the sense though of a snap of the two things being the same. So the two boomtowns on the other side of the world being very similar.
Yeah, and pleasingly neat as well.
It is pleasingly neat, isn't it? 444, yes, very neat.
And your covers, Nada Bakovic design. What was it like working with Nada? She did my cover too. I think she's brilliant.
Oh, fantastic! You know, I was like, I don't know what they're going to do with this.
It's perfect.
No ideas in this book, and she's done such a great job. And so apparently, the background is actually supposed to be represent the Northern Lights, which is, you can sort of see it, like the sort of Northern Lights there, and then we've got the little what do you call it, the little oil rigs and things, and yeah, I mean,
on the back. I mean the when she's talking about, that's the geese that drown in the pond.
The ducks, yeah.
The ducks, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, which I thought was really nice.
Well, Jay, we're nearly out of time, but I would like to ask you one last question. What are you reading right now? And after people have read Boomtown Snap, what can you recommend for them to read? Is there anything keeping you up at night or guilting you from your to-be-read pile?
Do you know what I have just discovered? And I'm a bit late to the party on this one. Anna Funda, Stasiland.
I just loved them.
Oh, did you?
Oh, it was fantastic. Yeah, you never enjoyed it.
The book was written in 2003 about life behind the Iron Curtain, particularly in East Germany. And I thought, because I lived in Poland for 3 years, I'm like, oh, I kind of feel like I know this story. But I read it because I got given a free copy. I went to the ABC and I did a book swap and I got a free copy. So I thought I'll have a read of it. And honestly, it was so well written and so interesting. And I came away and go, oh, okay, I didn't understand this. And I think it's so relevant for today as we think about how fascist societies emerge and how fascist societies potentially are taken down. I just think it's got some really interesting things to say about state control and power and coercion, and how we are used against each other for other people's purposes. So a little bit heavy, sorry about that, but really interesting read and so well written.
Stasiland, Anna Funda. Okay. No, thank you. And I reckon Tim asked the most interesting question. It wasn't quite a question, more a statement, but we did get to talk about
he brought up Nico. I was very impressed. Yes.
Tim, I'm going to put my email address here in the chat. Tim@gmail.com. just send me an email and I'll connect you to everybody, and then you can go from there with your address and everything. So that's fantastic. Kate Roan is saying, thanks so much, Jay. Have yet to finish, but loving being challenged, which is great. And yeah, thank you very much for a wonderful chat tonight, Jay. Our hour has flown by somehow. It's
Yeah.
yeah, but enjoy your time in dwelling up in all of your research. I really look forward to what you're going to write next. Boomtown Snap is available on Libby and available to loan for free. You can also get the wonderful audiobook version if that's your thing. Yeah. But Jay, thank you very much for being part of Libby Book Club. It's great to have you.
Having us is a great opportunity and a great initiative. Well done. Thanks, Julia, and thanks, David.
No worries. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for your company and have a good night.